Hi, welcome to the next video in the Professional Communication series, Acing the Job Interview. My name is Shoma Jurgensen, and I'm the School of Business Chair at Rasmussen College in Brooklyn Park, Maple Grove, Minnesota. At the conclusion of this video, you'll be able to accomplish 3 learning objectives. First, you'll be able to plan for a successful interview from the perspective of the interviewee. Second, you'll be able to prioritize your messages, particularly in how you prepare for this interview. And third, you'll be able to persuade your employer that you are indeed a fit for that position. Much of the content of this video does come from Business and Professional Communication, Principles and Skills for Leadership. However, the organization of the information is transferable to multiple different industries. Those who find themselves switching from one industry to another or graduating from a program fairly recently will get the most benefit from this video. Now, how do you plan for a successful interview? There are 3 ways to really prepare how you're going to present yourself in an interview. The first is to identify your goal. Now, you may be saying, well, what objective do I have other than to get a job? This is, after all, a job interview. But you really do have to think more deeply than that. The employer wants to see that you're not just showing up every day to get a paycheck. They want to know 2 things. One, what is your objective in terms of offering your value to that job? How does the job fit you? How does the job fit your goals? And then how do your personal goals align with that of the organization? So it's not just that you are applying for any job, but that you are trying to convince the interviewer that you are the right fit for this particular job. And that happens as you identify your goal for your job interview. Secondly, you want to research and prepare. There are 3 areas that you want to think through in this stage. The first are skills. Skills will really come in 2 buckets. The first, and I think foremost in people's minds, are those hard skills. The skills of what you do, that you type 100 words a minute, that you know XML, that you can design web pages, that you are an analyst and work well with numbers, and that you can use Excel. These are all skills that are very specific to how you do a job, but actually the job that you do. Now, how you do the job. Do you bring conflict management skills with you? Are you a strong professional communicator? How do you deal with innovation and creativity? These types of skills are called soft skills or transferable skills or adaptable skills. And these are the kinds of skills that make you a great employee, not just any employee. And these are the ones that you want to identify in yourself. Second, you want to think through the resources that are available to you. You're not just bringing your knowledge, skills, and abilities or your qualities to a particular job. You are bringing it to a particular organization and a particular job. So when you start your research, take a look at the organization's website. Get to know its mission statement very well. Get to know its purposes and its objectives and their strategies so that you can fit what you talk about in the questions and answers that you'll prepare, that you can talk about them in relation to the organization for which you're interviewing. And third, it's important not to ignore the fact that just like you can search for the organization and its purposes, the organization can search for you as well. I recommend putting your name into Google, Bing, and Yahoo and see what comes up. Do you have a professional photo on your Facebook page just like you do on your LinkedIn profile? Or is the one on Facebook pretty unprofessional? Are you posting things in the news feed that are coming up in the tops of the lists on Google Plus that show a less than professional side of you? Before you start interviewing, clean up your online brand. It doesn't mean that you don't have a personal life, but you want to make sure that as employers search for you and try and understand the kind of fit you would be for their organization, that you represent yourself in all communication the way you want the business to remember you. The third area is practice. When you practice, there's 3 areas once again that you want to focus on. The first are common questions. You can do an internet search for the common kinds of questions and prepare your answers. Now, when you're doing this, think not only about the kinds of questions, but the way that you present your answers to the questions. So think about these things. Can you tell a story? Is there an example that illustrates, for example, what your strengths and weaknesses are? You might want to talk about a weakness in terms of a challenge that you've overcome and you've learned from. What are those stories? Secondly, wherever possible, quantify what your answer would be. So, were there some measurable results? And third, try and have enough examples in your back pocket that you can choose the one that best fits that interviewer and the company that you're going into to interview that day. Now, this might seem like an awful lot to prepare. One way to narrow down the kinds of examples and stories and accomplishments that you want to relate is to use your personal brand. If you're interested in more about your personal brand, I recommend, for example, on my YouTube channel, Shoma's Classes, you can find personal branding for graduates. Or you can pop over to smallbiztrends.com and look for crafting your personal brand statement. There are a number of really good resources out there in order to help you craft your personal brand. And we'll talk in a little bit about how important that is as you're preparing. Not just to practice the delivery of your personal brand, but to use it to filter the information that you prepare for your interview. Now, the third thing, the first impression. Now, you will all have heard dress well, be there early, shake hands, and all of that. But the other way to think about your first impression is to think about your contingency plan. And I do this by asking myself this question: what will I do if? What will I do if I get stuck in traffic, there's bad weather, and I'm late for my interview, no matter how well I planned? What will I do if I spill coffee on my clothes in the car? What will I do if I've had a horrible morning and now I've got this interview to give? How will I prepare and practice through those scenarios? You want to be authentic. If traffic was horrible, you want to say when you get the question, or if you get the question, how was your drive in? This is not only a rapport building question, but it's also an interview question. The interviewer can think about, well, are they going to be positive? How are they going to handle this? Now, if you're late because of traffic, you might say something like, traffic was really horrible. I left 40 minutes early for a 20-minute drive. I'm so glad I did because I'm only 10 minutes late, but I do apologize for the delay. Do you have an extra shirt in your trunk of the car in case you do spill coffee on yourself? So think about how to ensure that your first impression has a contingency plan. Now we're at the stage where you prioritize your message. So I talked a little bit about making sure that you choose the right answers to the questions that you prepare. Now, how do you do that? There are so many answers. How can I talk about all the different examples of when I showed leadership? Well, the answer is you use your personal brand. So, there are times when you will say, yes, this is an example by which I want to be remembered. And there are going to be times when you'll say, no, this isn't an example that reinforces my personal brand. As you develop the questions and answers, this is where you have an opportunity to really narrow down the way in which you present. Which stories make the most sense? Which ones show the same skill but in a variety of ways? And how do I know I'm answering them in ways that show that I've done my homework? So of course you don't want to put a piece of paper with all your answers written out in front of the interviewer. But when you develop the answers to questions, you might want to consider bringing in pieces of the organization's mission statement or bringing in some of their objectives, goals, or strategies to show that you make the employer a priority as well. So preparing answers to these questions are very important in prioritizing your message. And finally, are you addressing both task and relationship kinds of messages? So it is important to talk about what you can do, but how do you make sure that your answers also address how you do it? You might talk about your ability to use a software system like Goldmine or Salesforce, but in that example you might bring in how you helped others learn the system when they were worried and nervous about change. Before we get to keep it legal, I'm going to talk about how talking about both tasks and relationship elements really helps launch you for success. Now, I wouldn't be responsible if I didn't address keeping it legal. Now, the interviewer's job is to make sure that they're only asking legal questions, but not all interviewers are well trained or are good at interviewing. And so think about how you would address it if you got a question that was illegal. A question about your age, your race, your sexual orientation, your gender, your family status. These are all questions that, if they do not pertain directly to the essential job function, meaning my gender shouldn't have any bearing whatsoever on my ability to market, right? So the question about my gender or my sexual orientation in that situation doesn't matter. Now, of course, one option you have is to sue the organization you've interviewed with, but that's typically not where you want to go first. How might you deflect? How might you turn the question around? You also want to know from your perspective of the interviewee how not to give the interviewer information that's illegal for them to ask. So what types of information do you want to stay away from? And really the litmus test for this is stick to the essential job functions. When you talk about your ability to lead, it may or may not be relevant that you are a woman or that you are 45 years old or that you have 3 children. What you want to focus on is your style, your personality, the qualities that make you a good leader, because those are essential to the job function. Now, it's time for the interview itself, and you really want to persuade the interviewer that you are a fit for that position. Now, we've talked a little bit about showing that you've done your homework. Working in the mission statement is an extremely important piece of persuading your employer that you know what you're talking about. You certainly don't want to ask questions like, so what do you do here? Or what is the mission? And sometimes for people who are interviewing a lot, you don't want to get the name of the company mixed up. So make sure before you go in that not only have you done your homework, but that you incorporate the research that you've done into your answers. Secondly, you want to close strong. So now you've gone through the interview. At the end of the interview, the interviewer should ask you, are there any questions that you have for me? If they don't, ask if you have a moment to ask questions. Now, the worst thing an interviewee can do when the interviewer asks, do you have any questions for me, is say no. You've pretty much answered them all. You should always have questions ready to go. Now, if they've answered a lot of them, you want to make sure to prepare enough that you have a few more to ask. So some great questions are, how long have you been in this position and what do you love about it? You might ask what the company's future plans are and how the position that you're interviewing for fits into those plans. This is not the place to ask about money or benefits. That comes after you've persuaded the organization that you are the right person for that job. Now, the next part of closing strong is making sure that you create a memorable thank you. Now, not only should you ensure that you understand what next steps are as you leave the office, but before you sit for your interview, pre-address a thank you note. Now, you will see articles that an email is perfectly acceptable. Now, it is, of course, because so many people don't even remember to thank the interviewer, that an email is better than nothing. However, to really create a memorable thank you, you should have a handwritten thank you note. One that is quickly delivered, so you mail it the minute you leave the office. Second, it's personal, that you draw something from the rapport that you've built with your interviewer to include in your thank you note. But it should also be brief. Don't write a story. simply have 3 to 4 sentences saying thank you, mentioning something from the interview that was personal, and saying that you're looking forward to the next steps or the opportunity. Because after all, the point of this is to make sure that you're not forgotten, that your thank you, your close, your information, all are happening in a timely manner. Now, thank you for joining me for the Acing the Job Interview video. If you're curious about the flip side, conducting a successful job interview, you will also find a video on my YouTube channel that addresses just that topic. Thank you very much.